son Adrian are heading for the railway works to make modifications to their 3 recently delivered rail cars.
Off we go. Nemshi. Nemshi.
Nemshi.
Nemshi.
What's here?
The workshops are vast, a vision of crew in the desert, but one trapped in a time warp. There's been no money for large-scale investment here for 25 years. Most of the original plant, however, still functions with a basic efficiency. The Sudanese craftsmen are the real asset. They take great pride in what they regard as their railway. They're short on technology, but long on enthusiasm. The Welshmen begin by modifying the oil cooling and exhaust systems on the rail cars.
The vicar says that maybe he's afraid that you can't tighten the filter, the oil filter, after making this bracket.
This sort of filter, you always do them finger tight, hand tight, and then after service they tighten up. It's something to do with the rubber in the top gasket, which leaches into the head casting. But yes, I think there's room there, because you only need a small purchase. But we have to support the silencer because this bellows here can't have any, can't carry any load. You know where it is? Okay, quick tap. Yeah. That torch isn't too bright, is it? It's got a brand new battery. How about a run up the inside of here, or has that been done? It needs twisting round as well that way.
They've run into a problem easily solved by any garage at home. A fault's developed in the electrics. Lacking tools and the right expertise, Hugh needs an electrical engineer. The nearest one he knows is 3,160 miles away, in Wales.
Evo! Oh, come on, come on.
At 9 a.m., they always blow a siren to call the whole town to breakfast. Our breakfast is going to be fool. What is in this food altogether? Tell us what are the constituents.
Okay. Yeah, it's broad beans, food, and tomatoes, onion.
Are there any calories in it which makes you fat?
No?
No? No. We have to eat this at home.
Yeah.
Another meeting, this time in the Chief Mechanical Engineer's office. Hugh relishes the role of advisor.
The pipe, when it goes in there, requires a very solid clip that must be bolted on with 4 studs fitted with tab washers. Yeah. So it'll never come off. I'll let one of them actually switch it on first before I touch that drill, I think.
Absolutely. Is it always like this?
I have noticed that the standards of electrical insulation, etc., are not quite that of the British standard. Here we go. There we are, look at that.
What is the capacity of the soldering unit?
Ideally, 500 watts. Ideally.
500 watts?
Ideally.
Okay.
The soldering, the piece of the copper on the end would be about as big as my thumb.
Do you have a piece of this cover? Because we can get and see.
No, an electric soldering iron has at the end a copper tip, which is about the size of my thumb.
500 watt.
I don't think it will be possible to find that.
It's an ordinary commercial tool. Supposing we could go and buy one. Is the souk open? Could we go and buy one in the souk? And we don't have one, so we could do with one in our kit.
The problem, the time is too late.
Yeah.
Suppose we couldn't find any problem. Can we make something temporary until we come back from Khartoum?
No, I'm afraid not, because of the only terminal box we could find requires to have cables soldered into the tags, and then the tags nutted down to the actual terminals. Now, the problem is, if we have a dry joint there, or a loose joint, or a screw joint, we'll have the same problem.
Yeah. All right, we'll try to do our best. Thank you.
I enjoy the challenge. I think that's one of the secrets that come in here from an engineering point of view. I suppose it's a clash of my mind, my skill, my ability, against perhaps the greatest odds, engineering-wise, that the Earth can offer. I suppose it's let nothing defeat us type of philosophy. That device didn't work. Let's try this one. It's a little bit like going to sea. Oh, this doesn't look good. There's no jaws in it. You have to keep the engines going. Third time lucky, I think they call it. But if you don't have the tools, you have to use your skill as a craftsman to find some way around the particular impasse that you have facing you. It's a little difficult when all you've got to do is walk 50 yards to find a vise that works, then walk another 50 yards with the job, having done it. 100 yards of jobs in these temperatures is a bit trying on an old man. Hard day. It's going to be a hard night now on that bed. Excuse me a minute.
Knackered. Totally. Yeah.
That's it.
I give it a quid now.
A pint of best, yes, please. Thank you very much. In fact, even better. Make it 3.
The pints will be a long time coming. Sudan's Islamic law makes alcohol illegal.
This is London. Greenwich Mean Time. BBC World Service presents News Desk. The world news read by Merrill O'Keefe. OPEC oil ministers have been involved in more hard bargaining in Vienna to try to reach agreement on production. And there's growing optimism about the outcome. South Africa has given its...
as a submission to terrorism and to anti-Islamic elements. Alfred Tabbank will accept support from Khartoum. Zimbabwe is the host for a meeting which started today, organised by the World Council of Churches in support of the frontline states. It's been billed as one of the best attended meetings ever.
In some ways, it's made him quite aggressive, business-wise. But you have to be that way. I mean, business world is quite a hard world anyway. I don't know, it's given him an addiction for it. I think he's become a workaholic. He's always been quite enthusiastic for work. It's in his blood. And my son is exactly the same. He can't wait to go back. They love to come home. But once they've been back 2 or 3 weeks, they're looking forward to go again. It's incredible.
Is the heat that really gets you down more than anything? It's a constant sweat. I don't know, sometimes tempers flare up.
I thought we were having an L-shaped thing that went over the top of here.
No, that's where he came up with that.
All right, then. So long as it's well, 100% welded all over.
And this
It's a bit tawdry, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. Squeeze up. Abdullah, you tell them they must all smile happy. Pretend you are laughing at me. No, don't look serious. You're laughing at me. You tell them. I have a small child at heart. Right. And frankly, I love playing with them because they respond so well to leg pull, humour. Life is so very serious in the UK. Not for you. Especially when you're running a company. To come here and to find that the technical pressures are of our own making. The commercial pressures are of our own making. The emotional pressure is one of just having fun all the time with these people. There's a smile on everyone's lips all the time, which is remarkable, bearing in mind how little they have and how hostile is the environment.
After a week, Hugh and Adrian leave Atborough for Khartoum in a rail car called Sid.
It's like being given a big train set for Christmas. That good. That good. I've got 300 kilometres of railway. And the vehicle that we designed and built in Tredegar in what was fairly record time, that seems to be working satisfactorily and everybody likes it. So what more could I ask for?
For a go in it, is it?
Oh, dear me. We're going to be here for a few hours with this.
Their journey has been interrupted by a local truck driver's rush of blood. He attempted the impossible. Now this gift from the people of America straddles their path like a beached whale. It should have stayed on Route 66.
I'm glad we got lots of water anyway. even if we haven't got a lot to eat.
What do you do to his hand? With tyres?
Yes. I think he's digging a pit for himself, isn't he?
See a bloke's hand?
Eh?
See a bloke's hand? His hand is up there like that. There's a big cut across there. He got stuck under the wheel on the track.
Ooh, look at that.
He's going to tip over there.
I thought he was going to tip over, yeah. I hope they got some chains they have got. Not strong enough to do that. Damage this. Tell him to jack the trailer down. And leave it there, and then bring the vehicle, a lorry, in from another angle. We ended up by packing the wheels, letting the tyres down, but it really came down to Adrian's driving skill to get this vehicle on the move again.
I've always wanted to drive American truck after seeing such films as the Rubber Duck and so on. And there it was, a Mack, just sat there stranded. And, well, I thought we were never going to move it.
What was that like, Ben?
Lovely.
مصنع بتاع محمد لم له المسامير ده لم له المسامير والبوم وكل
تمام؟
اوكي الدرايفر كبوت.
Four hours later, the journey resumes. They take the truck driver with them to hospital and probably jail. Before traveling south to the steam locomotives, Hugh must play the diplomat in Khartoum. It's imperative that he pay his respects to his client, the general manager of Sudan Railways.
The aid has come and the equipment is getting better. I believe Joe Blumarts could possibly be interested in making some money available.
Yes.
So,
well, actually, I've got some money available actually from the Saudi fund.
Yeah, they tell me that you're a very rich man these days.
There's another diplomatic detour to mend a Nile sailing boat.
Basically, there's no difference between a boat and a boiler, huh?
Dutchman Joe Bloemaert, the boat's owner, is Hugh's most important European contact. He's technical advisor for the European community in Sudan, and it's the community that puts up the money for the railways.
Let's see if we can find Sally Dab then.
Yeah. Please see you at the greeters.
Haven't seen him for a few months.
Sennar Junction, south of Khartoum, home of the steam locomotives Hugh and Sudan Railways restored to action to haul famine relief trains in 1985. The contract's now fulfilled.
It's worse, isn't it?
This will be his last visit.
Just stepped in it again. This one used to be the best one when it was at Babanoosa. Is there something wrong with it now?
Yes.
What's wrong?
Problem in the boiler. I have a problem in the boiler.
I'm trained to look beyond the layer of dirt. I'm looking particularly to see that the dust, when it does get into bearings, is treated and cleaned out, that the bearings themselves are in good condition. And I see that looking at the boiler, it's been priming, water has been getting into the cylinders. And the trouble with this type of design, this valve here is not big enough. And if you do get water in there in excessive amounts, then unfortunately you'll damage the piston and the cylinder cover. You can see the cotter. No, that's okay. There is some considerable merit in the simplicity of the steam locomotives. They do have a robustness which can tolerate abuse, and they have an ability to complete a turn of duty even when they've suffered some fairly catastrophic failure. Unfortunately, with diesel traction, when a red warning light comes on, it can be that the main engine will shut down. The failing, or whatever it is that's caused the red light to come on, is not immediately obvious, and to people not so technically advanced as, say, the Western world, it's often better that the faults present themselves before their eyes rather than appear in some black box. And Sally has asked me, he sent me a letter. Dear Phillips, please bring more nuts. So we have brought 50. There's 4 per locomotive, so you've got enough for 12 locomotives. Put them in the stores and guard them with your life.
Thank you. This is very interesting.
No problems with compressors then? No. Lovely surprise. Magic at a temperature like this. Got an opener? Cheers. Well, I've got my own personal theory that the sun and the strength of it in a country like this, it taxes the human frame to such an extent that if you're exposed to it for 365 days a year, that is bound to take away some of your resolve. Therefore, these guys don't have the same values as us. The last few years, they've had every affliction you can think of. How on earth could anybody, over a period of years, eventually be as aggressive and sort of go-getting as, say, the British are? The blower full on, here's the oil full on, and the safety valves are blowing like mad. I've got an agreement with old Sally Dabb, who is the now retired mechanical foreman at APRA Works. I've got an agreement with him that those 6 steam locomotives, 3 of them are his and 3 of them are mine. I picked the best ones, of course.
Whenever he doesn't want steam, no need.
That's right. We had this before. If the Sudan Railway's idea of working a steam loco is you put in as much fuel as you can, and you make as much steam as you can, and then you waste it.
He's supposed not to do like that.
Yes. Now, in your day, they wouldn't have done it in your day.
But they never accept our advice.
Well, you're only an old man like me.
Hugh remembers how sparkling those engines looked when they were first restored. They have suffered a bit since then.
You could do with some loving care and attention, or TLC as my wife calls it. I'm disappointed to see it looking a little unkempt, yes. But I do recognise some of the difficulties that they're working under. They got very little in the way of consumable materials and tools and spare parts, so it is very difficult, and some of the skills, of course, have been lost as well over the years. So, yeah, I am disappointed, but it's not the end of the world, and it's recoverable. This loco is in reasonable condition, and about 2 days of real effort, and it could be made absolutely A1. This sort of damage here, which is only cosmetic in a way, and did result from a gradient pin, as we call them, coming out and the coupling rod flailing about and damaging the thing. That's a fairly minor sort of problem. Me?
Britain, once upon a time, had some influence in this country, and the fact that we're British certainly carries some weight with the older generation. I don't think you can sell to a different culture to our own unless you make some effort to understand how they think and how they work, how they react. The big deficiency that engineering can never cope with in Sudan is the level of abuse, particularly from untrained hands. I'm afraid it is a mixture of ignorance and over-enthusiasm.
I'm particularly pleased with all the valves and the controls, Section 1 as we called it in the contract. All the stuff that we rebuilt in Tredegar, every bit of it on this locomotive is in perfect working order. There's not a steam leak anywhere. Yes, this is smashing.
I suppose what drives me on is job satisfaction. The driving force isn't wealth, having grasped a task and actually achieved it and seen it work, making the best of the most difficult conditions, tremendous sense of satisfaction. The success of the projects we've been involved in has been that there is a relationship between the Sudan Railways and the people in Tredegar.
This was Hugh's 21st trip to Sudan. Like the others, it's been hard but rewarding, both him and the Sudanese.
This may be where we go off to sleep. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, Aid.
He achieved all his objectives, except mending that electrical fault in one rail car.
What marks do you reckon for this trip, then?
6.9.
6.9. 6.9 out of 3.9. For technical difficulty?
10.10.
10.10. The usual for Sudan. Cheers.
The electrical engineer, flown out from Wales a few weeks later, fixed it in just 15 minutes.